Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HandfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HandfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HandfordCapital.com.
Hello, this is Dennae, and we welcome you to the Friday edition of the Tough Decisions podcast. Dan and I have been talking about the hiring process and some things to look for when you are looking to hire a new person. I'm going to do today's Friday edition by myself, although I can't take credit for all of these ideas I'm going to share with you. These are things that Dan and I have learned together. Some he's taught me, and some I think I've been able to sort of point out to him along the way. And so I want to share with you today some things to look for when you are reading and looking at a resume. Now, I first got this idea for a podcast when I was talking with one of our managers in one of our medical clinics not too long ago. He handed me 2 resumes and said, I was thinking about calling in these 2 people to interview. What do you think? And I took a quick look at the resumes, and after just a couple of minutes, I found myself giving him multiple reasons why I didn't think he should call this one particular person. And he sort of looked at me and said, "Really? Like, you found all of that from the resume?" And when I looked at it, it was pretty obvious to me. So I thought, maybe that's something that we could sort of share with people here is, what can you tell about a person from their resume? Now, a couple of things that you have to keep in mind, and I know Dan mentioned this maybe a couple of weeks ago, I think, that a lot of times people who are interviewing or applying for jobs, they will have a service write their resume based on information that's given to that service. So a lot of times, actually, a resume is not a great tool to use to find out a whole lot about the person himself or herself. That's why one of the things we have our applicants do is write a couple of paragraphs or a couple of sentences for us, because if they had a service write their resume and they can't put a sentence together, then you're going to find that out. Whereas looking at their resume, it might be all nicely proofread and put together and formatted the right way, but you're going to be able to tell if they can actually put a sentence together by asking them to answer a couple questions. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about here. I'm not necessarily analyzing format and, sentence structure and their ability to organize information. That's not what we're looking at here. Although if that's not there, that's a problem too, because, they can't do that, and then they also weren't willing to give it to a service to do. But that's not the kind of information I'm talking about here. I'm talking about today the kind of information that you can get from looking at what they have actually put on their resume. All right, so let's go through these. I have a list about 7 or 8 things, and there's probably more. I'm sure, at least from my experience, I find that the more you do and the more interviews you have and the more people you meet, you're always learning something. And so I'm sure that we could add to this list. Maybe you can add to this list, and I'd love to know what some of your ideas are. But before I start going through this list that I have, I do want to give you a quick disclaimer, and that is, the ideas that we've given you over the last several weeks are ideas that you can use to streamline your hiring process, to cull out candidates that are not going to work for you. And in every situation, there's always, when you generalize, you always risk leaving out someone that may work for you or may have been a good candidate. But these are generalizations. So I do understand that, all things considered, when you pull in other experience, when you pull in other information, you may still want to go ahead and interview this person. But if you're looking for a way to distinguish or discern between 2 different people, and you want to use your time to the best that you can, then these are some things to look for. And these are some other ways, some other pieces of information that you can look at to try to maybe save yourself some time. Or maybe you still do want to call them in for an interview, but maybe these would be things that you want to be sure to ask about in an interview. one note about that is when you do ask the question, maybe you're probing about a particular piece of information, you want to make sure you ask it in a way that doesn't lead them to the answer. You want an honest answer. And I know this may sound shocking, but sometimes people will tell you what you want to hear because they want a job. And so you want to ask it in a way that, allows them to answer truthfully and hopefully will allow you to tell if they're being truthful and doesn't lead them to the answer that you want. All right, so with that being said, let's go quickly through my list here. The first thing you want to look for is for job experience that's pertinent to your position. And this might sound like an oh duh statement, but maybe they've never worked. In our situation, I'll use our situation a lot here, but we own some medical clinics. Maybe they've never even worked in a medical clinic, but have they been in other work environments where they would have been able to develop the skills that you would need? Now, obviously, we're not talking about, any certified position or, we didn't hire any physicians that have only worked at Walmart, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But maybe you are needing a front desk person. Maybe you are needing someone to help with your new patients. A position like that. Maybe they've never worked in a medical clinic, but maybe they've been in another situation where they've learned a lot of customer service. Or I'll give you another example. We have a position in our office that involves a lot of talking on the phone. And so even if they've never, talked on the phone and scheduled medical appointments, maybe they've worked for an insurance company where they talked on the phone a good deal. And there's other examples I could think of. So look for job experience that's pertinent to your position, other places where they could have gotten that, because that may be the sign of a good worker, of someone who has a lot of experience doing what you need, even though it's not in the same exact setting. Something else you should look for. Are they excited to be in the field they're in? And this is kind of one of my pet peeves. But one of the things we used to get a lot of when we'd be hiring a medical assistant is, you'd have someone that graduated with their associate's degree or their certification in medical assisting, and they finished that degree or that certificate 10 years ago, and they've never worked as a medical assistant. And then they show up at my clinic and they want to be a medical assistant. It takes everything in me not to question exactly how much they want to be a medical assistant. Because if you really want to be a medical assistant, you can find a job. Now, it might not be your first choice. It might not be with the pay that you really want. But if you really want to be a medical assistant, you can do that and you can get experience and then you can move on to something else. But if they got their certificate to be a medical assistant 10 years ago and they haven't been a medical assistant since, then why are you coming to my clinic to apply for a medical assisting job? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that doesn't compute for me. Have they used their certificate? Have they used their supposed expertise since they got it? And if not, why not? I mean, that might be something that you want to ask about. Now, an obvious exception to this, but I'm going to go ahead and state it, is someone who just got their certificate, right? I mean, we had a lot of young people come in and apply for a medical assisting position and they had just gotten their certificate. And even if it was 6 months ago and they haven't found a position yet, that's totally different than someone who got their certificate 10 years ago and they've never been a medical assistant. So make obvious exceptions for people like that. But I think you understand what I'm saying about someone who has never actually used their expertise in a real life situation. Now all of a sudden they're applying for a medical assistant job. And you can see that, of course, by the jobs that they have listed on their resume. Also, something else that comes to mind is, a skill like phlebotomy. We have people that they're a certified phlebotomist, but then they've never actually done phlebotomy in a real clinical situation. That's a red flag for me, especially if I'm looking for somebody to do phlebotomy. And that actually happened not too long ago. I think it's been less than a year ago now that we were interviewing someone that was going to need to do phlebotomy. And it was actually stated in the lead generation ad that we put out that we wanted them to be able to do phlebotomy. And so this person comes in and they had a phlebotomy certificate. It was stated on their resume and they came in and she actually said, yeah, but I really don't like doing phlebotomy. Well, that's not going to work. I'm not even really sure why she applied for the job, but those are things to look for. And it was clear on her resume that she had never done and she had never been in a clinical situation where she did phlebotomy, even though that was one of the skills or the certifications that she listed as, a quality that would make her valuable. Something else to look for, the length of time that they've spent with a company. Now, there's a couple of things that you should look for here. Number one, have they been with a company for a really long time? because that can be a good thing. But if they have they advanced in that company? Have they held different positions? Have they been moved from one department to another because they're really good at what they do and they keep advancing and moving up? Another thing to look for, though, if the length of time with their company, has it been the opposite? Have they moved around every few months or years? They may be as qualified as you need. They may be overqualified, but if they have moved around every few months or even every year or so for 20 years, you're not going to change that. And if your position is one that you're looking for someone long term, then that is not going to be a good fit. You're going to waste a bunch of time and energy trying to train that person and get that person ready to go on their own. And within a few months or years, they're going to be gone because you can't change the person. Okay. Now, again, there are certain positions where that may not matter to you. Maybe it's okay that, this person is going to be gone in a few months. Maybe you just need a temporary fill or temporary fix. That's fine. But do look for that and be aware of what you're getting, because you're not going to change that. And you can be an awesome company. But if that's the type of person that's just, their lifespan, their job life cycle is, a year and a half or 2 years, that's who they are. And it's probably going to be who they are with your company. On the other hand, if they've had a job career of, say, 30 years and, they've held 2 different jobs or 3 different jobs, and they show in each of those corporations or businesses that they have held several positions, a lot of times that can be a good sign that, they were trustworthy, they were able to learn things quickly, and so they were they were given additional tasks or additional responsibilities. That can be a really good sign for you. Also, on the resume, look for conflicting information. And I know this sounds crazy, but people who are not being truthful, a lot of times you can see it right there on their resume. I look back at kind of a humorous situation, but we were looking at resumes for another position in our offices. And this person, it was obvious. She had jobs listed at the same times in her life in 2 different places. It's like, how did you hold a position in 2 different places? Right? Like geographical places. That's what I'm talking about here. And so that kind of thing can be a red flag for you. And there was also some other red flags on that particular resume. If I remember correctly, that was one where the individual had worked like 3 or 4 months at multiple companies. And there were just a lot of things about that particular resume. But if we did find it interesting that, they were working full-time at 2 different companies at the same time in 2 different geographical areas. So, the chances of that actually being the case were very, very little. But if you were to just read down through and look, oh, she worked there, they did this, that's great if you're not looking carefully. You also want to look at their resume and go, what is the ultimate goal of this person? Are they going to be satisfied at my company? In other words, am I going to be able to offer them the appropriate challenge that they need? Maybe they're overqualified. Maybe based on the things that they've done, the experiences that they have, they're overqualified for your position. That may seem like a good thing. And depending on, their place in life, their season in life, that might be okay. But a lot of times that's something to really consider, because if they're looking for a bigger challenge or bigger responsibility or bigger pay to go with that bigger responsibility, they may take your job while they don't have something, but the minute they find something else, they'll be moving on. And again, you have to ask yourself, is that okay? Maybe depending on the position, that might be okay. It might be fine to hire someone that is going to be moving on in a few months or years, but maybe not. I know when we're trying to find managers, when we're finding providers, we want someone who really buys into the vision of our organization and someone that we think is going to be around a while, because we spend a lot of energy and a lot of money hiring that person and training that person, getting them continuing education. I don't want to be doing that every few months. Life is way too short for that kind of life cycle in the job. So think about the position carefully, because it might be okay, but you might be putting a Band-Aid on it, and then you're going to find yourself in trouble again in a few months. So what's their ultimate goal? Are they going to be satisfied at your company? Those are the kinds of things that really you probably need to go ahead and do an interview to find out, but you should be aware of that dynamic when they come in so you can ask the right kinds of questions to find out. Is this the right position? Is this the right person for this position? Are they overqualified? Are they settling for a job because they're out of work, but in their side time, they're going to be looking for something else because this is just not the right fit for them and their experience. So some things to look for in the resume, hopefully save yourself some time and cut down on the interview process and streamline things so that you can find the right person for your job every time.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.